I think the one belief that grounds me is that compassion needs constant action. Whether it's a dog or a donkey in the brick kiln, or a bear or a leopard caught in a conflict situation, the heart must respond with empathy. The mind must look for a solution to alleviate either that pain or that situation in the landscape, in the wildlife landscape, especially as conflicts and cruelty seem to be escalating in today's world.
Hello and welcome to the Anahita Speaker Series by Carnegie India, celebrating stirring stories of empowerment, struggle, and success from women professionals in different fields across the globe. Stories we hope are bound to inspire young professionals. I am Mugdha Satpute, young ambassador at Carnegie India, and today we are truly honored to have with us Ms. Geeta Seshamani. Ms. Geeta is an active senior wildlife conservationist and animal rights activist. She is the Vice President of Friendicoes Society for the Eradication of Cruelty to Animals and also the co-founder and secretary of Wildlife SOS. She started working with Friendicoes, an animal welfare organization, in 1979. Her passion is wildlife conservation and research. Ms. Geeta has been a member of the Animal Welfare Board of India, Central Zoo Authority, the Government of India, and has received several Lifetime Achievement Awards and felicitations for her work in the field. Ms. Geeta co-founded Wildlife SOS in 1995 that runs several projects to support bear conservation in India, including the largest rehabilitation center in the world for sloth bears. Ms. Geeta was featured in Women of Pure Wonder, a coffee table book launched by Vodafone India and Vodafone Foundation. She is a recipient of the San Diego Zoo Global Conservation Medal for Conservation Action in 2018 and has felicitated with the Maharana Uday Singh Award in 2019 for conservation and community rehabilitation work. Ma'am, we are thrilled to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for calling me for this. I'm honored to be here.
Yes. So, ma'am, let's begin with your story. What were those early years like for you? Were there any moments, places, or people that shaped the way you saw the world and your relationship with animals and the natural world?
Well, I was an army child, lucky to have a wonderful childhood, large army homes, traveling from place to place. I was very fond of sports as a child, climbing trees, bringing home squirrels, birds, anything that was injured or needed nursing. And my dad was my biggest ally and influence. He was very kind and empathic to animals. He was fond of jungles and wildlife. At 5 years of age, for example, for my fifth birthday, he gave me an orphan puppy and he said that I had to raise it. So he taught me how to be responsible for something small and helpless. I didn't realize at that time that this was preparing me for what would become the largest part of my life. I lost him when I turned 17. As one grows old, one at last begins to see a pattern in one's life. Nothing is random. But at that time in my growing up years, I never actually consciously thought that I would be working with a Friendicoes or a Wildlife SOS. I remember when I was maybe just 13, I found a little black kitten. I took it home, and my mother said, "Oh my God, no cats in this house." And so we researched and found out that there was a wonderful British lady who had come to tutor the Nehru family's children, but stayed on to run some sort of a small animal shelter. And so her name was Crystal Rogers, and she had a small shelter in a part of Delhi. We got onto a bus and we landed there. Crystal stayed in a tent on this piece of land. And when she came out, there was this halo of grey curls, a puppy on one shoulder, and a monkey on the other. And I immediately, spontaneously said, Ma, I want to be like her one day. And my mother typically said, Oh my God, who will marry you then? Shadi kaun karega? They say. Probably, but someone upstairs heard the prayer and said, So it will be, Tatha Astu. I kind of fell into Friendicoes after a broken marriage, which in our days meant a nun like existence and a much loss of self confidence. So one day, Mum and I were going for a prayer meeting in the morning when we saw a dog lying on the road on the opposite side, and we assumed it was dead. When we returned an hour or so later, there was a motorbike in front of us, and it went over the dog's legs carelessly, and the dog just lifted its head. I screamed, Mum braked, we got out, we fed the dog some vibhuti, pulled it to the side of the road, and held it till it passed away. At that time, I involuntarily told Ma, there should be a place a dog and a cat can go to die in peace and dignity. And the next thing I knew, I was connected with this wonderful group of school children who had formed a kindness club under Christopher Rogers at the Convent of Jesus and Mary. And it was that kindness club which was to become Friendicoes. So, in a way, it was kind of destiny. And I haven't left Friendicoes since then. That's 45 years ago.
That is a very inspiring story, ma'am. Like the personal touch of such experiences makes or shapes your life and career. Like you never know what might happen in future and what might inspire you to get into a new field and work on such social and environmental issues. So thank you very much. Let's move on to the next question. In 1979, you began your journey in animal welfare with Friendico. What was it like to be a part of such a space? What did it teach you about commitment, community, and compassion?
Friendicoes grew through passion, a belief that every life mattered. Now, today it might sound like a cliche, but in those days of no social media, no mobile phones, not too much of television either, we genuinely meant that. It was Indira Gandhi, the then Prime Minister, who gave us our first little shop under the Defense Colony flyover. And people just started coming. I was wondering how people would know that there was a place where animals could be brought to if they got hurt or if they got injured. But people started coming, young people particularly started coming and joining the effort. And that's when I realized that Friendicoes actually was answering a huge community need. There was a need out there. We were given a little more space each time by the Lieutenant Governor, and that's how we still are probably one of the smallest shelters of India. But we continue to be there because we are now at the center in the heart of Delhi, which makes it very easy for every school child, office going man to bring the police, traffic police, to bring us any injured animal, large or small. And therefore, you're quite right in saying that it was a community need and that we partnered with the community, particularly the young people. Friendicoes has no formal membership even today. You love animals, you want to help, come and join us. You are a member of Friendicoes. So we try to keep it so everybody felt an ownership organization because compassion needs a lot of hard work and it needs sacrifice, but it needs daily diligence. You can't have a normal social life. It's a 24/7 kind of a venture with distress calls and it's emotionally exhausting. And with mobile phones and WhatsApp, it's a whole new world of challenges and demands. So, Mugdha, I think shelters hold a secret. Not only is it about healing animals, but more often than not, it heals you. And I think that is what brings people to volunteer and to visit and come to Friendicoes. And I think, yes, we do work very closely with the community. We are there for the community because without knowing it, working in a shelter transforms you. It starts healing you from inside.
That is a very heart touching answer, ma'am. You co-founded Wildlife SOS in 1995, a movement that reshaped how India thinks about bear conservation. Can you take us back to that time? What did the world look like then? And what were you hoping to change when you started out initially?
Very kind words, but when Wildlife SOS started, I and my colleague, we were not thinking we were catalysts of change. It was a very spontaneous response to a growing problem of Delhi. A lot of urban wildlife was being displaced by uh, unthinking, unplanned construction. Wildlife, decreasing forests, decreasing patches of greenery, and wildlife was appearing in people's gardens and backyards, civet cats, mongoose, monitor lizards, snakes, even hedgehogs. So we started rescuing these. So primarily we began as a wildlife rescue center. Then what happened next is why I often say uh, life can plan for you better than you can plan for yourself, because a series of coincidences happened. A filmmaker friend of mine took me to a village just outside Delhi, and it was a Kalandar village. I didn't know. And I saw my first dancing bear. Miserable, swollen muzzle, maggots coming out of its mouth, keening sound because it was tied with a 2 foot rope to a tree. But when I looked around me, not only was its pain and its trauma very evident and it tore at my heart, but also the lives of the people around was mind boggling for me. I mean, as an army kid going to the best of schools, best of colleges, I had a very privileged life. And here suddenly was my first, I lived there for 2 nights, was my first brush with poverty, which I had not imagined could be just 40 kilometers outside Delhi. Children with pot bellies, eyes full of discharge, matted hair. It changed my life in a way. Simultaneously, Animal Welfare Board of India wrote letters to me saying that tourists were coming to our country and they were extremely upset at the large number of dancing bears along the Golden Triangle between Delhi, Agra, and Jaipur, which was the route most taken by tourists. So I wrote back a pretty emotional letter saying I was definitely going to research the subject and give them back some kind of a report. And that's how it all began. For the next 18 months, my colleague and me, we traveled to over 68 villages. We stayed with the Kalandar community, we talked to them, we met with hostility, suspicion, anger, even aggression. Um, they couldn't understand what two individuals were doing, and whether we wanted votes, we wanted a political career on their backs, what we were doing. So we worked really hard at just getting to know the community. And then we came back with a plan to the Ministry of Environment and Forests. The then DIG of Forests was a very empathic individual and helped us, a visionary in fact, and he helped us to start the Dancing Bear project. We were challenged by a deep rooted traditional practice, by the fact that it was a livelihood issue, but we were so convinced that we knew what we were doing was best for both the animals as well as for the men. It was a very important conservation issue because all our research showed us that the bears that came into the system were poached bears. That is, they were coming from the wild. And consequently, there was a huge drop in the population of wild sloth bears. Almost as many as 200 cubs were coming out, and the mother bear is very fierce defender of her young. So the mortality was also high, and there was also an increase in the gallbladders that were going out, which were used by Chinese medicine, thereby showing a kind of a cycle here, which we between wildlife trade as well as the fact that the Kalandars were using the bear cubs for dancing. So it was a conservation issue which required a very huge solution. It couldn't be a solution which you could only solve by the Wildlife Act. Our legal system is very strong. The Wildlife Act is excellent. But at the same time, we felt that we needed a larger answer to the solution. And so that's when we embarked on the Holistic Dancing Bear project. I might add, with absolutely no clue because our funding was very low. We only had both our salaries to depend on. But we were deeply committed to taking the Kalandar people with us, the community, and the bears. Both needed rescuing and rehabilitation. And that was the most sustainable solution for long-term conservation practice and for making sure that we didn't lose the sloth bear in the wild. The sloth bear is unique only to India, with a subspecies in Sri Lanka, which made it a very precious heritage um, which we had to protect. Now, in retrospect only, I realize it was a huge ethical, cultural, or economic shift that we attempted. But then it was more visceral. We wanted the families to trust us. We wanted them to surrender the bears. We didn't want to use punishment voluntarily. We wanted them to surrender voluntarily and to build their lives confident that we wouldn't let them down, whether it was with seed funds or hand holding that would definitely be required for them to get into alternative livelihoods. I think big things happen if you can take honest small steps, which is what we did, one family, one bear at a time. And then came the bigger issues of water, the whole community, toilets, pakka roofs, and training the women to make them second income earners. That was really a big move forward in the community. It gave them a voice in the community, decision making powers, and they always use their money more wisely than the men, I might add. But the big game changer, the really big game changer, was the education of children. Educating the children and making it a bottom line that the women children had to be educated along with the boys. We wouldn't accept or pay for their. We paid for everything, whether it was shoes, school bag, a sweater for winter, but and even provided tuition so they could do homework back home when they returned because they were first time going to school from the community. But the girls had to go with the boys. That was absolutely non-negotiable. We have phenomenally dedicated people in this program in Wildlife SOS, and I would never have been able to look myself in the mirror if we had simply taken away their livelihoods with no sustainable alternatives. So it's a big team working out there at livelihoods, empowerment of women, and educating children. I often feel the bears were easier to handle than the community, but it's ongoing work and change is always slow and hard.
I completely agree with that, man. And uh, honestly, I feel it is such a great initiative that you have started, and you are working with the communities as well as with the animals, making sure that there is a balance and it's all sustainable for everyone. So let's move on to the next question. Your work has moved across so many areas: rescue, rehabilitation, education, policy, and now biodiversity conservation. Across all these different chapters, what has guided your decisions? Is there a core belief or value that helped you stay focused, especially when work has felt the most challenging?
Okay, I think the one belief that grounds me is that compassion needs constant action. Whether it's a dog or a donkey in the brick kiln, or a bear or a leopard caught in a conflict situation, the heart must respond with empathy. The mind must look for a solution to alleviate either that pain or that situation in the landscape, in the wildlife landscape, especially as conflicts and cruelty seem to be escalating in today's world. I never forget that look in that first dog's eyes. It was a look of trust. And I think all animals will continue to need our compassion for a long time to come. We have somehow fractured that trust between nature and us. We have fractured the ability to understand the role of nature, wildlife, and animals in our lives. So I think my core belief is that one must work with humility, the belief that someone higher than you is guiding you, and that extra strength will then come just when you feel you are being overwhelmed.
Um, Ma'am, in your view, what does the world of wildlife conservation looks like through the lens of gender? Would you say it has become a more inclusive space for women? And what still needs to be changed?
Um, Conservation and animal welfare is increasingly a space women do well in. And there is definitely a growing number of women in both fields. That's very reassuring and it's very heartening. But usually it's the back-breaking, quieter work of the background. It's the field research, photography, filmmaking, shelter care, not so much the decision making or policy making. In both Wildlife SOS and Friendicoes, we are extremely lucky. We have very strong, articulate women leading almost all our programs and all our keynote objectives pan India. They, in turn, I think, will mentor many younger women. We need more like them, and we rise very strong on their shoulders in both our organizations. So I think, yes, gender is always a factor, but in wildlife conservation as well as in welfare, I think women are definitely becoming the leaders and will continue to be the leaders because there is a gender based bias, I should say, towards compassion, towards empathy and understanding, which is more a feminine strength. It's not that men can't have that strength, but it is something which women can be proud of and need to nurture and cultivate in themselves.
I totally agree with your views, ma'am. And I think somewhere it is a field that women will that empowers women's skills and that womanhood and makes helps us in that being a mother to the animals which they might not have and make sure that they are having a good life, living peacefully and safely, be it on the streets or in sanctuaries.
You know, Mugdha, one thing particularly which I feel is strongly gender connected is that definitely our elders had a more intuitive closeness to the cycles of food, seasons, agriculture, how to deal with their animals, whether it was on the farm or on the street. And I think if any, that balance has to come back. It it might have to come back from a woman, a gendered a feminine perspective because they are at the core of this rhythm, whether it is of for the food cycle, whether it is for the agricultural cycle, whether it is the building of relationship with farm animals as well as street animals. Somehow I feel that women are more connected to that cycle and therefore can make a huge change in many ways.
Uh, Ma'am, if the next generation of conservationists is listening in right now, what's that one story, lesson, or piece of advice you hope they never forget while working in the field of biodiversity conservation and animal welfare?
One particular lesson. um, that this world of nature, forests, wildlife, companion animals is given to us as a trust. It's a privilege to protect, to nurture, to alleviate suffering. Please do that with humility and total dedication so that our children inherit the earth as it was meant to be, a place of tolerance, coexistence, and a lot more harmony that presently exists. Um, Nurturing nature is the best way of ensuring our own happiness and well-being. And therefore, whichever field we choose, respecting nature is absolutely the most essential um, ethical principle on which we can function.
As we move to the end of this conversation, I have some rapid fire questions for you, ma'am. Uh, what would be the one lesson animals have taught you that humans often forget?
Forgiveness, loyalty, patience.
Okay. What's always in your travel bag when you go into the field?
biscuits for kids and animals, and a first aid box.
Uh, what is the one sound of nature you find most calming?
Running streams, rustling leaves, and the absolute silence. Beauty of that silence.
Wow, I, I totally agree with you on this. Uh, if not animal conservation, what else might you have done with your life?
Traveling to all the beautiful spots in the world, wildlife, and retreats in the mountain.
I love mountains as well. So, what is the most memorable name you have given an animal?
Stardust, my Great Dane, she is my heart. Stardust. And my first German Shepherd, Cool Cat.
Actually went through some of your work and I found really very amazing and thoughtful names that you have given your animals. And I remember that the name of the first bear that came to you was Rani.
Yes,
So yeah, I'm really like I find it
yes,
really great.
yes. We learned everything we knew about bears through Rani. She was our very first bear. Yes.
So ma'am, uh, uh, sorry, I will- uh, ma'am, a heartfelt thank you for joining us today and sharing your remarkable experiences and insights with us. It was a real great pleasure speaking to you. And to our audience, we hope you are as inspired by this conversation as we are. Stay connected through Carnegie India's YouTube channel for more from the Anahita Speaker Series. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.